In this video, we'll be covering over the 1990s mob boss, John Stanfa, and his feud with journalists. We will go over in chronological order from each individual that he's made several feuds with publicly. For those who are not familiar, John Stanfa, who was born as Giovanni Stanfa, as we say in the American English language, in Italian you would pronounce this Giovanni, John Stanfa, was born on December 7, 1940. As of today's date, May 5th, 2025, he is still alive, and we will go over a little bit of a background of his life. He is an Italian-born American mobster and former boss of the Philadelphia crime family from 1990 to 1995. During his reign in the 1990s, he was assessor of the former boss Nicodemo Lil Nicky Scarfo once he was convicted and sentenced to life imprisonment for numerous federal charges. Once Scarfo was sentenced to life in imprisonment, the commission, the bosses of the five families, had allowed Stanfa to become the new boss of the Philadelphia crime family. Stanfa himself has also had a prior history with the Philadelphia crime family, especially being known in the public. He was a chauffeur when the former Godfather, Angelo Bruno, was taken home for his last ride and lost his life in the year of 1980. There have been many different speculations to which did Stanfa know about the Bruno hit, or was he oblivious to of his boss being whacked? We will never know, and he's never been convicted for that federal crime. On the contrary, in the 1990s, after he rose to fame to now be the new boss of the Philadelphia crime family, he had soon gained a faction against a younger crew. One of them was led by the reputed mob boss Joseph Skinny Joey Merlino. Unlike many Philadelphia crime bosses, John Stanfa was not only born in Italy, he was raised in Italy, so therefore he is accustomed to Italian culture as opposed to the United States culture. Angelo Bruno, Salvatore Sabella, Harold Riccabini, and many other different mobsters were born in Italy. However, they were raised in the United States and got accustomed to the United States culture. Therefore, John Stanfa had dealt with different custom norms that he was not accustomed to, especially when it came to a younger faction that was raised in America and just happened to be of Italian descent. Unlike the United States, in Italy, there are many different custom norms and coercion that can take place where it cannot in the United States, such as whacking out politicians, other gangsters within the crime family, and even journalists. However, that does not sit well within the United States. Stanfa was not accustomed to this type of politics, so therefore people who worked under his crew, such as Tommy Horsehead Scapiti, had to warn him about how much further he had to carry on through his violent regime. Unlike the United States, Stanfa wasn't following some of the custom rules, especially when it comes to mob hits. Particularly, when it comes to mob hits, usually a lot of mobsters attack other mobsters, especially within their own crime family. They don't usually go outside the mobster realm. However, that did not stop John Stanfa and to make alleged threats to. One of the people that he had recruited to work under his regime was Brenda Coletti. Brenda Coletti was the wife of Philip Coletti, and they themselves had to participate in possibility of whacking out Joseph Skinny Joey Merlino and his friend Michael Cingolini. Unfortunately, Michael Cingolini lost his life due to a violent shooting that was carried out by Philip Coletti, John Vizzi, and Brenda Coletti, who had her own participation by reporting that a car was stolen, the getaway car that was used in the shooting of Merlino and Cingolini, and it was torched just so they could report that the car was stolen and therefore they can get away with it. However, all three participants have become government witness to avoid any more harsh penalties. These three participants will later have to turn on their boss in the future. Also, during the 1990s, the fact that John Stanfa had Brenda Coletti to participate in the Philadelphia crime family was very unheard of. Usually, women are not allowed to be participants in the Philadelphia crime family. It has always been predominantly male, whereas though in the rules in Italy, the exceptions of the rules are a little bit more open. Another different rule that was not accustomed into the Philadelphia crime families when John Stanfa was to whack out women in the general public. One of John Stanfa's intended targets that he wanted to take out was Kitty Caparella. Kitty Caparella worked for the Philadelphia Daily News. She herself was a journalist that worked for the Philadelphia Daily News and had made columns and reports about the Philadelphia crime family, including John Stanfa. One thing about John Stanfa, he was known for being very hot-headed, and if there was any negative reports written about him, he wouldn't take too kindly of any words and will mark you possibly even for death. The good news for Kitty Caparella, she is still alive to this day and was not harmed in any shape or form. However, she did see reports from many different news column reports that John Stanfa and some of his entourage were likely to place any harm towards her, especially under his orders. We will show you some of the articles in which Kitty Caparella wrote herself about John Stanfa, which is not too negative, but either way, if you wrote anything in any form of journalism, if you have wrote anything negative or factual, you could be considered a mark under the John Stanfa regime. And that was Kitty Caparella. Another person that was allegedly threatened by the John Stanfa regime was journalist Giraldo Rivera. Giraldo Rivera is an American journalist, attorney, author, and political commentator. Giraldo Rivera, as you may know as of this day, worked for the Fox News Channel from 2001 to 2023. He's currently working on Newsweek Nation and still makes his own political commentary, as you can check in as of now. But at this time, during the 1990s, he worked for many different news channels, including having his own show. Giraldo Rivera, as you can see here, and he also trying to interview John Stanfa here at this Philadelphia warehouse. As you can see, this famous Warfield Street Diner has been a historical building, not only for when Giraldo Rivera had his life threatened by John Stanfa, but this is the same diner in which Joseph Ciancaglini Jr. was shot by a group of mobsters, and this mob hit in progress taped, as you can see here from this video.
Look closely. You are witnessing a mob hit in progress. 3 hitmen are entering this Philadelphia diner armed with handguns. As the gunmen leave, they take one last look at their victim, who lies bleeding on the floor. Then they jump in a waiting car. No one is ever charged, but everyone agrees it was a mob hit.
That's what it looked like then in the 1990s, and we will show you what the diner looks like as of today.
Look closely. You are witnessing a mob hit in progress. 3 hitmen are entering this Philadelphia diner armed with handguns. As the gunmen leave, they take one last look at their victim, who lies bleeding on the floor. Then they jump in a waiting car. No one is ever charged, but everyone agrees it was a mob hit.
All right, George, we're here in Gray's Ferry at the site of the old Warfield Diner, a historical FBI tape here, a mob hit caught on tape. Tommy Scapiti was one of the guys carrying out the hit.
Yeah, it's the only time, I think, in history that a mob hit has been recorded while it's in progress. And Scapiti testified he was one of 4 shooters who busted in here pre-dawn, March the 2nd, 1993, and opened fire on Joey Ciancaglini. Now, the other interesting thing about Tommy Scapiti's story is another one of the shooters he alleged was Mikey Ciancaglini. So it was brother against brother, part of the deterioration of this Philadelphia crime family.
And the camera that the FBI had was right across the street in an upstairs window at a building, and they had a bug inside. camera that the FBI had was right across the street in an upstairs window at a building, and they had a bug inside.
A bug inside, so we see it's shadowy because it's pre-dawn, it's dark, you can't recognize the shooters, but we hear the footfalls, the running in, you hear the waitress scream, you hear the gunfire, you see the shadows come running out again. It was a fantastic piece of tape. It was played again and again and again for the jury.
You've been covering them up for a long time. Ever seen anything like that before?
Never have ever, I don't think anyone in anywhere else in the country has a tape like that. It's unique to Philadelphia. It might be unique to the world. I don't know of any other mob hit in progress that's been recorded.
All right, now let's talk about Tommy Scapiti. What kind of witness was he in your estimation?
Tommy Scapiti was a very effective witness, although ironically, his testimony about this particular shooting didn't result in any kind of guilty findings because there was conflicting testimony from another witness. But in terms of talking about the inner workings of the organization, the extortions, the greed, the treachery, and talking about the individuals, you got to remember, Tommy Scapiti grew up with Joey Merlino, George Borghese, the guys on that faction, and then he switched over to the Stanfa organization, spent time in jail, was ready to come out, and believed he was going to be killed if he came out, and that's the reason he flipped. But he did his time as a wise guy. He did what he thought a wise guy was supposed to do.
And he played both sides of the fence. He was a money maker, had all the places, 300-400 names of people they got street tax from, kickbacks from, stuff like that. So both sides wanted him, right?
Yeah, I mean, when he switched over from the Merlino faction to the Stanfa faction, that's what he brought with him. He brought income. He brought revenue. I mean, that's what he was. He was a street guy. He was a loan shark. He was a bookmaker. He knew how to make collections. And that's what he brought to the Stanfa organization. And then he was convicted along with Stanfa, and those guys went away. And as he's about to come back out, and Joey Merlino and those guys are in charge, and Ralph Natale, Tommy Scapiti starts to hear he's got a problem. And that's what causes him to flip.
This is the same diner in which Giraldo Rivera in the early 1990s had went to talk to John Stanfa to try to get an exclusive interview, as you can see here from this video.
Warehouse. Mr. Stanfa? Hi. Giraldo Rivera. How you doing? Can I speak with you a second?
Get out of here from my place.
Can I speak with you?
Get out of here.
Can I speak with you just for a minute
Get
there?
out of here from my place.
And as you can see, that interview did not go so well. John Stanfa had asked Giraldo Rivera to get out, be persistent to getting an interview with him. Tommy Horse says Scapiti is the one that closes the door and follow his boss's orders. There were some report and allegations that John Stanfa was trying to send a hit out on Giraldo Rivera by having someone to be on a motorcycle to do a drive-by shooting, rather if Giraldo Rivera was standing on site or getting in his car. So as you can see, Kitty Caparella, Giraldo Rivera are also still here with us. And another person who can make commentary on the Giraldo Rivera hit is on the Mob Talk with David Stratweiser and George Anastasia.
Problem. And that's what causes him to flip.
One of the things he talks about is a alleged hit on Giraldo Rivera. Giraldo comes to town, gets into a confrontation with John Stanfa, and supposedly Stanfa wants him hit.
It happens right out here. Stanfa had the food distribution company right here on Warfield Street. Yeah. And Giraldo came here to do a show and went knocking on the door, as only Giraldo can do. And it annoyed Stanfa, and according to Tommy anyway, he wanted to whack him.
Yeah, he said next time he comes back into town, we're taking out him and his cameraman.
Yeah, exactly.
Giraldo didn't take too kindly to that either, by the way.
No, well, you know what? I mean, that was indicative more of Stanfa than it was of anyone else. Stanfa just didn't quite get the whole idea of the way the American media operates. Sicilian, if you're not with him, you're against him, everybody's an enemy. That's the way Stanfa was. I mean, he wanted to pop me at one point, too, so that's just the way he was.
Yeah,
So as you heard from George Anastasia, he too was also threatened by John Stanfa. John Stanfa, like we said before, was not very friendly towards the media personalities. He himself has also threatened George Anastasia, and we heard more reports about it through many different mob informants. And you could hear from George Anastasia himself, which he and his family were threatened, similar to Giraldo Rivera, from this audio recording.
You know, Pepe, you know the way the newspaper business is. You're writing a story about somebody, you're obligated to call them up. And I was writing a lot about the Stanfa organization, so I would call him up. He had a food distribution center, Continental Foods, down in Southwest Philly, off of Grace Ferry Avenue. So, you know, I would call him up and say, "This is Anastasia with the Inquirer. I want to talk to Stanfa." Boom, they hang up the phone. And apparently he got pissed off about this. He got pissed off about the stories I was writing. Now, you have to remember, he's Sicilian. He's born and raised in Sicily. He was an adult in Sicily before he came here. And in Sicily, if you're not with them, you're against. They kill prosecutors, they kill judges, they kill reporters. So he got pissed off and he told one of these guys, find out where Anastasia lives, get some hand grenades and throw them in the window. Right? Now, thank God it never happens. I'm sitting here talking to you. It didn't happen. But after Stanfa gets convicted, along with a bunch of these guys, the guy who was supposed to do that, a kid named Sergio Battaglia, he starts cooperating because he's looking at 30 years. And I get a call from prison, a collect call from prison. And I always accepted the collect calls because you never know who was coming in. This is at my office, Cherry Hill, and it's Sergio Battaglia. And he says, look, I want to let you know I'm cooperating and there's some stuff going to come out about you. And he proceeds to tell me the story. And he says to me, but it was nothing personal. I said, Sergio, you know, I got a wife and 2 kids. Hand grenade comes through my window. It's very personal. Right. He said, well, by the time we got the grenades, we were so caught up in the war with Joey Merlino that we stopped looking for you.
And there you have it. So Kitty Caparella, Giraldo Rivera, and George Anastasia are alive and well and avoided a very violent outcome from the John Stanfa regime. John Stanfa's reign as a mob boss was over in the year of 1995. He was convicted of multiple charges and was sentenced to life in prison, as he still remains as of today. This concludes our report on the John Stanfa feud with media journalist personalities. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for watching this video. Please subscribe to our channel and check out more of our content. Feel free to give your feedback and suggestions on what we should do next in the comments. This is Infinite Lee Productions. We love ya.